Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Think Outside the Board. I'm your host, Brian, and today I am shooting a Game of the Month video. This is for February, and the Game of the Month is going to be right here. He's going to sit here while we talk about the other runner-ups of the month. Dice Throne Adventures is going to be the Game of the Month for February. Now, when I did this video last month, I did a reprint of the month and a runner-up, and a non-new Game of the Month and a runner-up, and then a new Game of the Month and a runner-up. The new Game of the Month is essentially the Game of the Month. And the qualification for the non-new Game of the Month is just something that's over 6 months old. So the idea there is just to highlight some other games that I've been playing lately that maybe aren't games that I'm playing only because they're new and I need to play them to make videos. So if you're seeing something that's a non-new Game of the Month, chances are I like it because it's cycling around again into play. So I thought it would be helpful to, shine a light on those games as well. I have not played a lot of reprints, and I have not played a lot of non-new games this month, which means there will not be runners-up for those categories. Instead, we will only be talking about one game for those categories. So, the non-new Game of the Month is The Crew. And The Crew, for anyone who somehow hasn't heard about it, is a trick-taking game. The difference with The Crew is that it's a cooperative trick-taker. And this is a great game, I think, to get people playing games who aren't maybe big board game nerds, who don't play games as much. There are a lot of people out there who play card games and trick takers, and this is something that probably will appeal to them. The one big difference is that trick takers are usually competitive. So for people who maybe play a lot of bridge or euchre, if you're trying to introduce them into The Crew, you may need to impress upon their minds that we are all in this together. Because if they're just out for themselves, The Crew's not going to work. But generally what you do in The Crew, there's this weird kind of story that's not really a story, but it kind of gives a little bit of a flavor to each mission. There are different things that you have to do to win each of those hands, turns, games, whatever you want to call them. But they require that certain players take certain cards in the trick. And how this generally works is that you'll see the mission and you'll see the cards that people are going to need to take in tricks. And then you'll put them out in a tableau and people will essentially bid on them. So maybe I take the green 3 and Mary takes the red 7 and Bob takes the blue 2. So then when we're playing this game, we would need to each take those cards in tricks. And if someone else accidentally or unfortunately takes the card in the trick that someone else needs to have to win the game, then you fail the mission. The further you get into it, the more is going to be required of every mission and the harder it's going to be to complete. Now, my fiance Kristen and I have been playing this a lot lately just because we can take it up to the bedroom. We can essentially play it in bed. It's very easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of space. The one little exception there is that when you are playing a 2-player game, you need to have sort of an AI tableau as a third player, and you'll be taking cards from that AI player as you're going around. So it can't really be played 2-player, not fully, but it works pretty well. I think it's probably not quite as fun as it is with 3 or 4 players because dealing with this tableau is not the best use of The Crew, in my opinion, but it does make it playable at 2. It still works. It's still fun. So it's good, but I think it's going to shine more at 3 or 4 players, and we have a couple of friends in Atlanta that aren't huge board game players, but we see them a couple of times a year. We play euchre with them a lot. So I know if we get this game out, the 4 of us are going to have a riotous good time playing this. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing this with them, and Kristen and I have been enjoying the 2-player variant. So it's a pretty good game. I'm not hugely into card games or trick takers. So the fact that I am enjoying this means that if you like trick takers and card games, you'll probably enjoy it even more than I do. And I'm recommending it. I'm recommending it as my favorite non-new game that we played this month. Moving on, the reprint of the month is going to be the companion to this guy over here. This is Dice Throne Season 1 ReRolled. The reason that this is a reprint is it was originally kind of self-published by Nate Chatelier, the designer, and Manny Tremblay, the artist. They did such a good job with Dice Throne, and it caught on so much that Roxley basically wanted to get in on the profit making, I guess. They beefed up the production value and helped with the marketing and distribution and stuff like that. And they worked together to do Season 2, Battle Chest. So then they basically went back to Season 1. They threw in a couple new characters, the Ninja and the Treant, and they repackaged it in a new Battle Chest that was very similar to Season 2. So I've heard people worrying a little bit that, oh no, what if they do a Season 2 ReRolled? Or in the future, what if they put out more seasons and then they redo those seasons? Like, should I be buying this game? Should I be holding out and waiting? And the answer is no, don't wait. And the reason is the ReRolled version was done to kind of bring everything, the game, the components, in line with Season 2 once Roxley had been publishing it. So ReRolled happening was a one-time thing for Season 1. It's never going to happen again because it doesn't need to happen again. Anyway, let's talk about Dice Throne a little bit in general. So if you've never played Dice Throne, it's kind of like a Yahtzee type of game, but with characters. And you're going to be fighting each other, much like you do in King of Tokyo, I guess, except that your characters come with individual player mats, and each character has its own deck of specific cards, and that includes upgrades that you'll be able to buy for your player mat. So when you're rolling your Yahtzee-like dice, depending on what you roll, you're going to be doing various kinds of attacks. And you'll kind of be able to select from among the different things on your player mats. Now, most characters have a small straight and a large straight. You're rolling 5 dice, so the large straight is usually all 5 dice. So they kind of have to be in order, like 1 through 5 or 2 through 6. And then a small straight is generally a 4 dice straight. So it could be 1 to 4, 2 to 5, or 3 to 6. So if you get any of those will generally trigger some pretty good abilities. There's also something called an ultimate that all characters have. And I think all characters have their icons on their dice are specific from character to character, but I believe they're all the same in that 1 to 3 is going to be one kind of icon, 4 and 5s are going to be a second icon, and 6s are going to be a third icon. So the character's ultimate is basically 5 of the 6 icons. So it'd be the equivalent of rolling 5 6s. But occasionally you have cards and you have player abilities that can help you turn dice or change dice. So you may be able to get an ultimate more easily than just randomly rolling 5 6s. Anyway, that is an attack, though. If you manage to get it or kind of tweak it, you'll get this huge power. There are other amounts of damage that you can do when you just roll kind of the 1s through 3s. And yeah, it's all different from character to character. And that's kind of what makes the game so fun and so variable, is that you've got all these characters to choose from, and they all play differently. But they all do include these kind of deck construction decks. They all do include tokens that you'll be using to activate different abilities. And they all do include the dice chucking and the kind of very fun, chunky, tactile dice. And you'll be triggering powers off of them. So if you're just playing normal Dice Throne, you're going to be just fighting against each other. You'll each start out with 50 health. You can heal 10 above your starting health, so you can heal up to 60 health. And once any player goes down to 0, they're going to lose. And you can play this kind of a free-for-all with a bunch of players, as many as you really can fit in the game. You can play one-on-one. You can play teams, 2 versus 2. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to play this, but essentially it's all fighting. And so you're going to be playing some players versus other players. Also, in Dice Throne Adventures, they give you some boss characters. So there is the possibility you could take those boss characters and kind of use them as a one versus many against the characters in Season 1 ReRolled or Season 2. Anyway, the curious thing about Dice Throne for me, and I've already done a first impressions video on it. I've done a first impressions video on this as well. So if you want information on either one of these beyond what I'm saying here, you can go look at those videos too. But the interesting thing about this is that I'm not super interested in direct conflict games, and I'm not really that interested in dice chuckers. But Dice Throne is so well produced and so kind of brilliantly conceived and designed, and the production value is so good that it has become a game even for me, and even for my fiance Kristen, who doesn't really like these direct confrontation games either. Now, we're probably going to mostly play Dice Throne Adventures because we prefer the co-op version, and I'll talk about this more later in the video once I've talked about the other games in this video. But we still do really like Dice Throne in general, and this is still something I may whip out when I have some friends over and a game night, because it's almost a filler that you can play in the beginning of the evening or the end of the evening. And it's very easy to teach and very easy to play. So it doesn't require a lot of time outside of just throwing dice and fighting. So this is a very good game to kind of have for multiple reasons. But I think it really says something that for someone who's not generally into these types of games, I still really, really like this game. And so much so that it's become my reprint of the month. Okay, let's put this aside. Before we talk about the game of the month, we're going to talk about the two runners-up. So these are the two other kind of newish games I've played this month that almost were game of the month, that could have been, that are still really, really, really good games. And the first one of those is Dune Imperium. I also have a first impressions video on Dune Imperium, so you can go view that if you want to see more about it. But essentially, Dune Imperium combines deck building, worker placement, and an area majority battle that happens once a round as part of this event. And players are going to be scoring victory points up a victory point track to 10, and they'll get those generally from winning those events, as well as from going up the 4 reputation tracks. There's kind of multiple ways to score on the reputation tracks, and they can also buy certain expensive cards that will give them victory points. Dune is very well designed, and it's from the designer of Clank, which is a very well designed series. So hopefully you're in good hands with this game. If you are interested in a kind of minis upgrade for Dune, you can go to Direwolf's website. And again, that link is on my first impressions video, because eventually, if you like this game as much as I do, you may want to upgrade beyond cubes to minis. So that is something right now that's on pre-order. So you can go check that out. But Dune is just a really, really smart design that combines deck building, worker placement, and this kind of every round contest in a really compelling way. And it offers a lot of good choices. It's a game that is definitely going to go into my top 100 list. I don't know exactly where, but fairly high up probably. Dune is heavily thematic. It's got a lot of good choices to make in the play. It's compelling, it's fun, it can be pretty cutthroat. I think it's going to be as cutthroat as the players playing the game, but it is just such a well-designed system that I think most groups are going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's going to last a long time. You're going to be able to play this one for a while, I think, before you get tired of it. Anyway, that's Dune. Since I'm not having runners-up for either the non-new games or the reprints this month, I felt I should have 2 runners-up for Game of the Month, because there are 2 games that I really, really liked in addition to Dice Throne Adventures. And this other one is Excavation Earth. Now, this is a game that I backed as a Kickstarter, and it arrived, I think, in December. So I'm a little unsure about where to slot this thing in terms of year of release, because I did get to play it in 2020 since I backed the Kickstarter. but it's not going to hit retail until 2021. So I don't know. I'm unsure if I'm going to put it on a 2020 list or not. But this is a game that I really like. It is designed by David Turksey. It is called Excavation Earth, and it's essentially a market manipulation game and a worker placement game. So thematically, players are aliens who have come to Earth after Earth is seemingly extinct, and they're plundering Earth for artifacts. And then they're going to take those artifacts, maybe they'll also take some artifacts that they bought on the black market, and they're going to try to sell them. And the selling mechanic reminds me a lot of like the Gallerist or Lisboa in different ways. So to sell your artifacts, you're going to go to a certain market where you can sell it. But if you want to do a really good sale, you need to set up a 2 or 3 artifact sale that all happens simultaneously. And in order to do that, you need to have presence in multiple markets. So that can take some time setting up on the board with your workers. There's also a way to kind of manipulate what buyers are in the markets by using different actions. And so you're going to want to be doing that as well. But when you do make a good sale, you're going to get a lot of points, a lot of point bonuses. And then the agents that were involved in that sale, cubes kind of that you've put in the area where that sale happens, will then go off to another board and participate in an area majority scoring mechanism. So you've got kind of multiple things going on in this game, although it looks kind of simple. It's just very crunchy in the sense that a lot of times you're needing to plan out turns 3-4 turns in advance for what you're going to do. Almost at the beginning of the round, you need to sit there and try to figure out all your turns, and then you may need to change that a little bit as the rounds go on, but it helps to be planning that far ahead to really know what you're going to do. But you'll be acquiring these artifacts, you'll be selling them in certain markets, you'll be manipulating the markets themselves, you'll be engaging in this area majority thing for scoring at the end of every round, and then you'll also be taking samples of the artifacts that you're buying and selling, and you'll be placing those samples in sort of a player board area that's like a giant grid. I think it's 4x5. And at the end of the game, you're also going to score points for how many samples you have in the various rows and columns. And it's kind of like, the more you have in each thing, the more you score, but it's not a 1-for-1 thing. It's kind of like, ranges. So once you get a certain number in a row, you'll jump to the next range. So there's a lot of kind of mental calculating that you need to be doing to figure out, well, I can score points here and there, but what's going to score me more points? And, this is going to score at the end of the game, so maybe I don't need to worry about it too much in the early part of the game. But just there's a lot of really good crunchy choices to be made. And David Turksey is becoming one of my favorite designers. He's done so many good things. He also has the Defense of Procyon coming out this year. And he worked on Perseverance Castaway Chronicles with Mind Clash, and that I think is supposed to hit late this year, although chances are it'll probably get delayed into 2022 just with all the shipping backups. But I really like this game. Now, I do have one friend who really didn't like the game, and I don't think my fiance loved it either, so this may not be for everybody, and you definitely should do your research. But it is a heavy market manipulation game with worker placement, and I really liked it. So you may want to go check it out and see if it's for you as well. But finally, the game of the month is Dice Throne Adventures. If you don't know Dice Throne at all, I've told you a little bit about it in this video with ReRolled over there. But generally when you're playing Dice Throne, before this existed, you would be playing these kind of one-on-one battles or teams. But essentially, Dice Throne Adventures is a dungeon crawler. And there is so much kind of variability baked into the way that the game plays. So when you are playing Dice Throne Adventures, I guess you could do a one-off if you really just wanted to fight a boss or something. You could always make that happen. And generally, though, you'll be playing campaigns. And campaigns are essentially 8 games. And you're going to do a portal crawl and then a boss fight, and you'll alternate. So essentially, you'll do 4 portal crawls and 4 boss fights. And again, if you want to see more about this, you can look at my first impressions video if you want to see the components and stuff like that. But when you're doing a portal crawl, you're going to pull one of these portal crawl setup cards. And I think there's 4 or 5 cards for every level. So when you're doing the first, the level 1, you'll pull out 4 cards, you'll randomly take one, and it'll show you a whole setup for all these tiles. And the tiles that you draw will be random as well. So the card will show you, oh, in these areas I'm going to place level 1 tiles. In these areas I'm going to place level 2. Over here it'll be a level 3 tile. Here it's going to be the kind of big boss fight that will end that portal crawl. And so you put these tiles out. The card that you use, to select the tiles is going to be random, right? It's going to be one of 4. And then the tiles that you're placing out are all going to be random because there are many, many tiles that you can choose from. And then you will go through this kind of dungeon layout. And every time you go to a new tile, you're going to do something there. There'll usually be like something that you gain or lose or a challenge or something. But there will be a fight with a monster. And every time you win a fight, you'll gain treasure. And you'll go through this kind of dungeon crawl. You'll need to claim 3 different die faces that will be on different tiles. So you'll have to beat the monster there to claim the die face. And once you have all 3 of the die faces, you'll be able to access the tile that has the final boss for that portal crawl. So it's a dungeon crawl, really is what it is. And it's a dungeon crawl playing cooperatively with Dice Throne characters. So you can take any of those really cool Dice Throne characters, mix and match them, go in here and play cooperatively, which adds a whole other element to the Dice Throne universe. And really, this was the thing that made me get Dice Throne, because I knew with my fiance and we don't play a lot of heavy conflict games. I don't think we're quite as bad as, Rado and his wife refusing to play them, but we don't enjoy them often, let's say. So I wouldn't have bought Dice Throne alone, just because I knew that she and I wouldn't play it. And often if I do gaming events and game days and things with my friends, we're probably not going to be playing, one-on-one conflict games. We're going to be playing kind of meatier, heavier games. So it wasn't really a game that I felt that I needed in my collection, but it's a game that I've always enjoyed whenever I play it. But I knew that Dice Throne, making it cooperative, was the key for us. That's what we were going to really enjoy. And the portal crawls are really fun. The boss fights are really fun. When you do a boss fight, you're going to be playing kind of a super version of one of the characters that's in Dice Throne Season 1 ReRolled. So there are 4 of them that have kind of fallen versions that are super pumped up. And at the start of a boss fight, which will be, every even numbered game within the campaign, so 2, 4, 6, and 8, in those games you'll get a boss fight. And you'll pull out certain cards at the very beginning, and the boss will start with a certain number of combat points that they can kind of pay to upgrade certain abilities on their player mat. And then they'll get a certain number of combat points every round, just like players do, and they'll be able to trigger certain cards in a regular deck that come out for abilities and stuff like that. And it's fun. Playing together against a boss is fun. I think maybe the portal crawls are a little more fun, but you're alternating them. So you do one, you do the other, and it gives you a nice kind of change of pace. So the boss fights don't have a lot of variability because they are set. When you get to game 2 in your campaign, you'll always be fighting the same boss. When you get to game 4, you'll always be fighting the same boss in game 4. And you'll always be fighting the same boss in game 6 and in game 8. But that's okay. And I think there's room in the future if they decide to do more with this where they could add in more bosses or kind of mix it up. But for now, I think there is so much variability within the portal crawls, and the boss fights are just kind of one-offs, that it totally works. I think between the variability of all the different portal crawls that the cards, the organization of the tiles that you could play with, and then the tiles themselves, and then the monsters that come out, because every time you get a monster, you're going to draw a different monster card, and that's going to be different from game to game as well. There are a lot of different monster cards. I think between all the variability of all those things, all of the games are going to be much different. Plus, you're going to be playing with different characters, and you may be playing at different player counts. So even though it's kind of samey in its design, where you're going to be doing a portal crawl and then a boss fight, and the boss fights for rounds 2, 4, 6, and 8 are all going to be the same every time, I think there's enough variability in everything else to really kind of keep it fresh. And out of all the games that we've played recently, the kind of campaign games like Sleeping Gods and Dice Throne and Seventh Continent and Jaws of the Lion. This one is my fiance's favorite. This is the cooperative dungeon crawlery game that she wants to play the most. So, I mean, that certainly says something in and of itself. But I think Dice Throne in general is just so tactile and so fun. It's very addictive. It's like you don't want to stop. It's like cigarettes or potato chips. You just kind of want to keep playing Dice Throne. It doesn't have a huge narrative storyline like some of those other games to kind of keep pushing through. So you're not going to have a big narrative storyline. There are unlockables. So as you're playing this game, there's all this variability in it. There will be certain cards and things that come out, especially after you finish your first campaign, to give it even more variability. So there's a lot of variability in the box. It's just not going to have like a strong narrative story. That's what it doesn't have. But everything else it has in spades. Everything else, it is chock full of dice chucking, tactile, deck constructing, token playing, cooperative, take that, push your luck goodness. It has a great game tray system that makes it really easy to set up and put away. Much more so than, let's say, Sleeping Gods, which I just did a first impressions video for, which is sort of desperately in need of a better save system, rather than just throwing a lot of plastic baggies at you and telling you to bag everything separately when you've got 9 different characters and like 10 different kinds of tokens. It's insane. But this has a beautiful save system, a beautiful set of game trays, and everything about it is just fun. I really can't see anyone. I don't know who wouldn't like Dice Throne Adventures. Maybe, I mean, I'm a heavy Euro gamer. So there may be some heavy Euro gamers that wouldn't like Dice Throne because they just only want to play the really chunky Lacerdas. I love chunky Lacerdas. Nevertheless, this is so well designed and so fun to play that there's no way that it wouldn't just get an amazing review from me. So that is Dice Throne Adventures. This is the game of the month for February. Take a look at the various videos I've made for this thing. I don't know when it's hitting retail. I got the Kickstarter, so this is from the Kickstarter. But I think this is really going to appeal to most gamers. All of mainstream gamerdom should at least give this game a try, because I think it's going to connect with almost everyone and make a lot of people very, very happy. So be looking for it when it hits retail, and or whenever there's a follow-up Kickstarter campaign, because there has to be. It's too good not to have a follow-up Kickstarter campaign at some point where they add on some kind of expansion stuff, whether it's more of everything or just more boss gods or who knows. But this is such a good game. If you're just discovering this channel for the first time, please consider subscribing. You can also like the video, and if you want to leave comments below, I try to stay on top of those. This channel is still in its relative infancy, although I do have plans to make a ton of videos over the next couple months. I have a lot of good games that I've got kind of in the pipeline, so I think it's going to grow by leaps and bounds. But right now, still small, still growing, not a lot of comments. So your voice will be heard very loudly. So if there's anything that you want to ask, it'll be very easy for me to respond. Apart from that, just thank you very much for watching, and have a fantastic rest of February, and I will see you in the next video.